Talk Shoes.
Recorded live.
Hello and welcome to the Castle Dracula podcast. On this podcast, we talk about horror movies, vampire movies, and all-around awesomeness. And this week, we conclude our Evil Baby Retrospective with a look at an evil baby all grown up. The third movie in the classic Omen trilogy, Omen 3, The Final Conflict, also known as Barbara's Baby, no kidding, starring Sam Neill as Damien, the son of Satan. Bear in mind that if you haven't seen today's movie, we're going to be talking about it from the perspective of horror fans who have, so warning, spoilers ahead. I'm your host, Jason Henderson, author of the brand new Alex Van Helsing adventure, Triumph of Death, in hardback and ebook from HarperCollins, so look for it at Amazon or your local store. With me are Drew Edwards, the creator of the long-running horror webcomic Halloween Man, which you can find at halloweenman.com. Say hello, Drew.
Howdy, y'all.
Tony Salvaggio, creator of Psychom Book 3, coming this August 21st, which is tomorrow, or around now, whenever you're listening to it. Coming now from Right Stuff and Tokyo Pop. Say hello, Tony.
Howdy.
That's Psychom Book 3. And Adam Foshko. We have a guest this week. Adam Foshko, screenwriter and consulting producer for such games as Skylanders and the upcoming Skylanders, Giants, Call of Duty, Modern Warfare, Prototype 2, Sleeping Dogs, and like a billion others. You can find him on Facebook and at IMDb. Say hello, Adam.
Hey, guys.
You got the longest epithet, and I think that's because you're new.
that guy.
That was really cool. No, okay. All right. Omen 3, The Final Conflict. This is the drum up, and then I want to hear your thoughts. Omen 3, The Final Conflict tells the story of the now adult Damien Thorne, CEO of the multinational conglomerate Thorne Enterprises, as he consolidates power and becomes ambassador to England, even as he plots to eliminate Jesus himself, whom Damien calls the Nazarene, and who he believes will be born any day now. So as Damien sets his army of secret acolytes called the Disciples of the Watch on a modern massacre of the innocents, killing all the males born in London on a recent March day, a small cadre of Catholic priests sets out to assassinate him. But you know those secret sects of Catholic priest assassins who pop up in movies from time to time? These are not those guys. A lot of people die, but Damien does get his in the end, thanks to a literal Deus Ex Skyana. So, first impressions. We're going to go Drew, Tony, Adam, and then Jason. First impressions, Omen 3, The Final Conflict. Drew.
I did not revile. I didn't have the amount of bile for this movie that I did Omen 2, which was considerable. I thought this was entertaining, although still rife with many of the same problems as the second film. Really what saved this movie was Sam Neill to me. I think he puts in a really, really good performance. He's a plausible enough quote unquote supervillain, but he never goes completely over the top, and except for in one scene, which is actually to me the most memorable scene in the whole movie. But
I'm curious when we get to that what scene that'll be.
I would be surprised if you guys didn't hone in on it as well. But it's still, the first one is so great. And I know I said this incessantly last week, and this is just kind of a B movie. I mean, it was an entertaining B movie. But when you come from that very first Omen, like pretty much anything that follows is kind of going to be a letdown, I guess.
All right. So a letdown from Drew. Tony, what are your thoughts? Opening thoughts on Omen 3.
I mean, I liked it. I agree. It's not nearly as good as 1. It's certainly, I enjoyed it better than 2. But I mean, I don't know. I seem to be I think I'm the only person from talking today that actually was like, oh, that wasn't so bad. I mean, in the grand scheme of like all things that I watch, I've seen a lot of really, really crap movies, horror movies especially. I don't know. I don't mind Omen 3. I really, it doesn't really hold up at the end, which I had forgotten about when I had seen it before. But I don't know. There's a lot of good bits in it. It's just, I think I do agree with Drew. Like, if they would have stopped at 1, everything would have been fine. Everything would have been good. They didn't have.
So you're coming over.
Sam Neill does rock, and I still hold that everyone needs to see Possession, the uncut version especially.
So that's your endorsement, end-all endorsement.
Little.
I mean, but it's funny too watching Sam Neill. Maybe we should get into this later, but this is first impressions. But like, I don't know. I thought it was all right. I didn't think it was stupendous, but I liked a lot of bits of it, I guess. And I didn't really like the end.
All right.
Terrible.
Yeah.
We'll get to the end. We'll get to it. It is all kinds of things, some of which are terrible. Adam, your first impressions. Welcome to the podcast, by the way, and your first impressions on Omen 3, The Final Conflict.
Well, here's the thing. I mean, I was a giant fan, obviously, of the first one. It had all the atmosphere, and it had, the idea of ubiquitous evil and sort of the hand of the devil and sort of this strange sort of conspiracy of people who are trustworthy, that you should usually expect to be trustworthy nannies, whoever, and, this whole sense that the hand of the devil is, hand of evil is sort of everywhere, it's around every corner, and it was a very intimate sort of picture with Gregory Peck, and it was very claustrophobic in a bunch of different ways, and tons of atmosphere. Second one was boarding school, and let's face it, boarding school is evil. So it's not really unexpected to have the ability to kill people with your acolytes in your mind. But this one, if you look at the picture, this is where you get your first impression of it. When you see the poster, you see basically a very handsome and I think well cast Sam Neill. I have to agree. As 32-year-old Damien Thorne holding one of the knives of Megiddo, and he's standing in front of the presidential seal, and you go, "Oh, I see. Okay, this makes a lot of sense." So it kind of connects. It skips over the second one and kind of goes back to the notion of the end of Omen 1. You could just completely ignore the second one for a moment and say, well, the president, he's been raised in a affluent, if not presidential, certainly government appointed sort of household, which would keep him in line with power, and this will be the culmination of the great plan for the Antichrist, where he assumes control of a great superpower, and then presumably carries out basically a reign. Except unfortunately, it really doesn't become that. It's something that either you get a promise of this premise, and really you get an initial setup, which I think is quite nice, of the things that are happening in the Middle East, the idea of touching on Armageddon, and then we'll talk about specifics. But the truth of it is, it goes from something which could be very big and very interesting and sort of really now turning all the tumblers for full effect to now deliver on sort of what will be a great final conflict, to basically a very small picture, not even intimate, just small. It just falls flat halfway through, and really it's just Sam Neill running around shouting Nazarene and hunting for babies, and and it's very it's not at all what you expect when you go in, and it's entertaining the same way that just regular drama from the 80s is entertaining, but it just nothing happened in this picture, and I can't tell whether it's because there were budget changes or something, and they went and shot in England, so he's not even pursuing the presidency. It's sort of like he makes this weird right-hand turn to become an ambassador to the UK, and then it really just becomes about being in the UK and all these different things and hunting babies, as I said, and there's just not a lot of there. There's not a lot of substance. There's some nice bits. I had the benefit of seeing this in the theater when it first came out, and I was a whole lot younger then, but I saw a lot of these kind of pictures. And like you guys, I've seen a lot of great horror and terrible horror. This is a mainstream picture that had a full release, and it was really meant to be something big, and it just was okay. I think it did okay I didn't see what the numbers were. I think it did okay in the 80s, but it seems like it didn't have any of the hallmarks of any of the Omen stuff. It just seemed like, there were Rottweilers who could make you kill yourself or do whatever, and even the bits where bad things would happen. I mean, you had, guys chasing, these terrible 7 monks who were like the keystone cops of Christianity. Just
so let's save the monks, though.
All right. But my point is that things would happen that were just so anticlimactic. It was less about the Antichrist and more about the anticlimax. And it just seemed like it fell flat. And I remember reading that Richard Donner was going to direct this once upon a time. And the directors who directed this also did later Alienation and even I think he did Beowulf with
Christopher Lambert.
That's right. And I think it was fine. It's just I don't know if they knew what this picture was supposed to be, and it just feels like it doesn't have the same tone. It doesn't have any of the sort of the gravity. It certainly doesn't deliver on the promise of its premise. And in the end, it just you go through an hour and a half and you go, huh, really? Okay. And it's heavy-handed at the end. I wish I could say that I love this picture. The best thing about it, really, as you said, is Sam Neill, and of course and I think the best bit in it is really the killing, the assassination of the ambassador. I think that's a bit that
which happens right up at the front. Well, wait, before we get deeper. So so far we've got kind of an unhappy vote from Drew. We have a pretty positive feeling from Tony. You have kind of a disappointed feel, like do you think this is it betrays the premise?
It's a missed opportunity more than anything else. It's not a bad picture. It's just I think the expectation is it would be so much better, but it just doesn't. It promises a lot and delivers very little. And I think that's the great disappointment. Not that it's a bad picture. We've seen bad pictures. You and I have seen bad pictures, sure. And it doesn't pretend to be anything other than it is. But this comes in as a big end of a trilogy, as a big final conflict, and it becomes sort of it just falls flat. And it's unfortunate to say. It's really sad. You just go, nothing happened. There's no great plan. Really? This was it? I stick with one.
Okay. So staying at the high level with first impressions. So I follow you. I mean, I wouldn't. It's not that nothing happens. It's the problem is that for me, it's not that it's that nothing happens. It's that you've got 90 minutes, and I think they spend them on the wrong stuff. And I feel terrible about this because I know we have people, on the board who are big fans of this movie, and so there are things I like here, but my disappointment in it is that I've really been looking forward to this third movie, and I haven't known anything about it because I didn't see it in theaters. I've never seen it, and I've been following, the first movie and the second movie, and all I knew about the third movie was the poster. And so to me, that was somehow. I know it's not fair to judge a movie by its poster, but somehow it would be President Damien Thorne against Satan, against Jesus somehow, that somehow it would be Armageddon. I understand that, even a big budget picture didn't have the money to be full on Armageddon, but I really thought that we would go there, and you could even do that without making him president, but it would have been easy enough to make him president. And instead, I was really disappointed that what we have is a movie about a supervillain with absolutely no one. Once again, third movie here, we still have no one who's remotely capable of facing off against Damien, and so that's kind of it's a disappointment to me that maybe that's consistent with the other two movies, and I'm just wrong, but I know what would be satisfying to me, and that didn't properly satisfy me. So let's get into it. Let's see where to start. We should start really, I guess, with Sam Neill as Damien, because if he doesn't work, then then the movie doesn't work.
Okay, so before, I just think, well, here's something that's funny, though. So I know I talked about Possession, and because it has Sam Neill. And what was funny about the intro to Possession, where everybody in that cast is just, it's just an insane movie. Somebody wrote how much they hated Possession, just absolutely couldn't stand it, because Sam Neill is usually really awesome, and in that movie, and you get the impression, and Lars at the Draft House gave this endorsement. He's like, you can just picture this guy sitting down for his Sam Neill. Like, he's got his popcorn, and it's Sam Neill night, and he's going to watch Possession, and it's going to be amazing because it's got Sam Neill, and that's his dude. And then he watches Possession and goes, oh, man, this sucked. How could Sam Neill be in this? But I wonder, the whole time I was watching this movie after that intro, I was just kind of like, I wonder what he thought about this one. Is this also, like, is this good enough? Is this true Sam Neill material?
Well, Sam Neill's
I don't know.
the thing about this, though. Like, and there is the old saying that even if you're in a bad movie, be the best thing about it.
Well, and he is
and
the best
this is
thing
definitely,
about it.
Yeah, I mean,
so let's describe him. Sam Neill. Yeah, I don't know how old Sam Neill actually is, but Sam Neill is a New Zealand actor who, if he was in anything before this, I don't think anybody's aware of it to speak of. You know, this is the first major movie I'm aware of with Sam Neill, and this guy is so handsome that he was nearly James Bond. It just didn't happen that way. He lost James Bond to Timothy Dalton, but he's a really good-looking actor. He probably would have done well to just go ahead and use his own smooth accent, but he looks like Maxwell Lord. He has.
Well, Maxwell Lord is based off of him in this movie.
And if people don't know what Maxwell Lord is, that's a character in DC Comics who is basically an ultra-powerful business magnate who has secret machinations to control the superheroes. And so,
well,
now that I say that out loud,
he financed the Justice League for several years.
Right, but he had, and of course he had slightly evil, and I think in the end, Wonder Woman had to kill him.
That's a whole. We could wax on that. That's a whole other thing. Don't get me started on that.
Anyway, Sam Neill. Sam Neill is this super handsome guy in a suit with brown hair. He is, he's a progenitor to our modern, young auteur CEOs. He's like Richard Branson in a sense, only better looking than Branson. And he controls this giant conglomerate that I guess is doing all kinds of things like charity and food distribution and all that. And he has his inner circle, which in this movie is represented by exactly one person, until we meet the rest of his servants. He has one, senior vice president who is down with Damien being the Antichrist.
So they're meeting. He's the inner dot, really.
Which again is why conspiracy theories don't work. You know how many people, if you told everybody that you were the devil and you had a whole board that knew you were the devil, everyone would know you're the devil. And that's why
right.
He's got exactly one person. He's got
that's
one
right.
dude, and he's like, I'm the devil, and that guy's cool with it.
That character was funny to me because he was just like Damien's buddy. Like, they even crack jokes with each other. Damien sends flowers to his wife when she's in the hospital. I mean, those
were some good bits.
More with that character, actually.
Those were actually some really good bits. That guy who is his assistant, and I can't remember the character's name is what is it? I've lost it for a second.
Henry.
Anyway,
it's Henry.
Henry. His assistant, his vice president, whatever he is, Henry. Yes. That guy is down with the fact that Damien's the Antichrist, and it is just business. And I love this. This is actually some of the ripest, best stuff in the whole movie because, they're having these meetings, and Damien, in my mind, Damien's like pitching a baseball back and forth going, I know that, Jesus is coming soon. We got to do something about that. And And the guy's like, yeah, and oh, I'm having a son. Okay, that rocks, and it's this extremely casual view of evil, and I love that. I kind of dig that stuff. Now here's where Damien falls apart for me, and I mean Sam Neill Damien. And forgive me if we jump around a little bit, but if we jump to later in the thing, we've seen Damien Sam Neill be extremely believable as the Damien who can order people's deaths, and he is totally believable doing that. I believe his casual evil when he says, bring me the head of 1,000 babies, basically. I totally believed him that. When he has to walk around towards the end of this movie yelling at a disembodied force, asking Jesus to come out and present himself to him, I got the impression that Sam Neill had no idea how these lines were supposed to be read. There's a point towards the end where Neill has to walk around going, Nazarene, show yourself, and I kind of felt like he thought these, and maybe I'm projecting, but I felt like these lines were silly, and he didn't know how to say them. And I say that because
he does very well in what could have been a silly scene, where it's the part where he's basically molesting a inverted crucifix.
Yeah.
And that could have easily been a silly scene, and ends up being appropriately kinky and weird. And it's got the same kind of dialogue. So I just kind of wonder if they didn't have an ending in mind when they started shooting, and they may have handed him those pages and he'd be like, really? This is the ending? Okay.
Yeah, I think you're touching on an important thing, and that is that it just seemed like Sam Neill is a good actor, I think, in a lot of ways. But I don't think he had a lot to do. He didn't have enough to do in this. Where it seems like just by the fact that the film kind of derails at some point midway through, kind of makes you go, well, they didn't really quite have an ending, I guess, or they didn't quite know how it was going to resolve itself. So it's possible they just kind of went, just act. Here, go with this.
Yeah, we can kind of follow, in fact, Sam Neill and go, so when we find him at the beginning, well, I guess I'll put off what I feel is a problem, because I don't want to necessarily get into the end. So it's my fault for that. Let's follow him. At the beginning, we see him, and he wants all power, and he sets up the premise of the movie, which is that he has read some scripture, some basically very, very obscure, completely made up apocryphal book. And I grant that you can say all you want that Apocrypha is made up at some point by some Jewish scholar back there in the Middle Ages. But anyway, he has this Hollywood made-up Apocrypha book that says that Jesus is going to be born in England. So Damien needs to hie thee hither to England, and so he wants to become the ambassador. And so that's kind of cool. You see his machinations, like, I'm going to get myself made ambassador. And the vice president goes, well, how are you going to do that, Damien? There's already an ambassador to England. And he goes, leave that to my crow. Although there's no crow in this one, but
he has Rottweilers again. We're back to Rottweilers.
Yeah, that I like. But that's not the only dog, which we need to get into eventually, because that's awesome.
Oh yes,
I know everybody hated that. I just thought it was just a crazy choice.
We'll get to death by beagles.
They made beagles the horror thing. They made it like the birds. How can you not at least appreciate that? Like, hey, look, you know what wasn't scary? The birds, because you could put on a helmet if you really want to defeat birds. But beagles, I don't know, they're a little bit bigger. You can spin them out.
Hey,
beagles
nothing can stop a hungry beagle, okay?
Yeah, you can be killed by their cuteness.
So it's actually, in my mind, I just pictured a Hungry Hippos kind of game, only it would be like little beagles, and there'd be like this bouncing ambassador character just in the center who would like bounce around, and you go, yip, 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 yip. But, and my mind goes in strange places. But
I will have to say, again, back to Sam Neill, when he sells it, they tell Sam Neill, you're going to sick beagles on somebody.
Oh, he does.
And you're gonna. And when he says
confident.
when he says his line, which is like, what's he say?
It's take him. He says take him.
Take him.
But the way he sells it, and the just
It is a wonderfully.
Like it's so evil. I mean, he's telling beagles to attack somebody.
Well, and he says it
and
with
so
a sigh. He says it with this
evil.
beautiful, like he goes, take him. Like this is so almost funny and tiresome even to him.
That took it differently. He's like, yes, do this. This is awesome. I'm attacking you with beagles.
But
that's
so
great. It's just so, I mean, it's great for all the ways that I like. I guess why parts of the reasons I like horror movies. It's like you would think, like, okay, so he has pit bulls the whole time, but when it comes down to killing somebody, they don't attack him like the previous movie. He sticks beagles on them, and they just destroy this guy, which is just nuts.
So
yeah, and young cop, like, because when we get to the Kung Fu Priest, I have actually a bunch of questions and comments on that too.
So that scene is a central point. And I think it's one of the points where it really goes wrong. I mean, but these early scenes are good because we follow the knives and then we follow Damien going because they dig up the knives and the knives make their way in a wonderful scene with no dialogue. Beautiful. We are set for a great show when this thing starts. And then Damien shows up and I want to go to England. Okay, and so he sends a psychic dog that convinces the ambassador to go and rig a suicide machine that is pretty cool. And
it's good.
I can't sign off on it because why didn't he just shoot himself? It was an awfully convoluted way to do oneself that.
Because the devil is a jerk. Because here's the thing, he rigs the whole thing up, he makes him go through this whole thing. You know,
so someone describe for us how this happens. How does the ambassador off
So the
himself?
Ambassador has a shotgun of some sort in his desk.
Premise,
he takes
ambassador keeps a big shotgun in his office. Okay, go ahead.
He gets a typewriter ribbon, and he ties it up, which I guess that would be impossible now. That we'd figure out something. He would have rope or blinds or whatever. And he rigs the typewriter ribbon, and he rigs it up so that whoever pulls open the door opens it. Now, here's the deal. This is why the devil's a jerk, and that's why I wrote this down. You know who's got to live with that the rest of their life? The woman who pulls open the door and has to live with that. She killed the ambassador no matter how many times she goes home and tries to rationalize that he committed suicide. She's still the guy who killed the ambassador. Now, and
she'll never knock on a door again.
All those people had to watch it.
Yep.
Every one of them. And so the devil's like, take this, check this out. Hey, you saw this horrible thing, and you're the one who killed him, even though he really committed suicide. How's that feel, everybody? And you're like, man, the devil. Wow. Yeah. How did you? Because if he just did it, it would be just him involving it. Instead, he wanted to make a lesson. He's like, I'm going to ruin like about two dozen lives. This is going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, that's amazing. The Rottweiler could have just made him go, oh, you know what? I'm tired of all this ambassadoring. I'm going fishing. I quit.
Yeah,
you're right.
But no, he does this whole thing and calls a press conference too, so it's wildly public, and it's something they have to deal with immediately. I suspect it amps up the pressure or whatever else.
That's the thing is there's got to be news media, there's got to be a cleanup crew. This is like maximum damage for an ambassador. He could have just jumped off a cliff, right? Or like Adam said, he could have just gone fishing, and that I'm no longer an ambassador, and I'm gonna live as a hermit. Instead, the maximum number of people for one person, short of blowing up a plane or something really crazy.
Well, and to your point about the devil being kind of a drama queen, this is exactly the kind of thing he did in the first movie, too, because I'm for you, Damien, and committing suicide so that you need to go get another governess. That was perhaps more than he needed to do in order to...
Everyone at the party had to see that. Fair enough. Everyone at the party had to see that.
Right.
Like, wow, how... Hey, you know what? How can I scar a lot of children?
Yeah.
Oh, the baby.
And Good Tech went, okay, scratch the piñata.
Right.
The piñata.
Could have put blood in the piñata. That would have been terrifying.
Yeah.
Oh, no, wait. Let's have somebody hang themselves at a birthday party. That's gotta.
Yeah, the devil in this movie is quite, he likes to screw up parties. I noticed that. He He always has bad luck entertaining for other people. I mean, when the
certainly according to Tony, he's entertaining himself.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Why not? You're the devil. I mean, what else do you? That's kind of part and parcel.
No, I completely concede to your point.
Yeah.
But I like this devil. This devil is the same one in 1 and 3, and not the one who's like randomly turning levers and like, knocking off crazy Rube Goldberg like contraptions.
Because really, what we're talking about is that this is the thing that entertains the audience, that is sort of sticking with the Omen pictures. They're like, oh yeah, he's back.
Yeah, I think
it's
so.
One of these things.
I think,
and that's the end of Act 1. Because look, once Damien gets to England, okay, premise is set. I'm in England now. Now let's find this Jesus. Where is he? And now the movie. This is where the movie goes wrong to me. Actually, is the moment they go, okay, what are we going to do now? Damien's in England, and I really wish in my mind that somebody had said, hold up, let's go back. I feel like we've gotten off track here, because there is now exactly really 3 plots. Damien wants to go find this baby, which is going to be born on March 23rd, I think he says, or 24th.
Because he read that somewhere and didn't bother reading it anywhere else. Yeah. He's
translating. He's doing this crazy Indiana Jones stuff with the prophecies, and he's figured out the date, and that it's going to be England. But as we'll read later, he's only read the part that he circled in red pencil, I guess, because he didn't bother to read the next line or interpret it in any sense.
I totally would have bought that if he said, something like it's a translation, that it's a scripture that it's the devil's Bible, whatever it is, whatever you want to say. It's just something that we would not be. With me, you say it's the Book of Hebron. You go, the Book of Hebron? Wait a second. From the Apocrypha? Just a second. Or if he had a plan that was like, look, I know how it's supposed to unfold, but you haven't read this book, and here's how we're going to change things. And it would take us in an area that would be completely away from babies and everything else.
Yeah.
It would be more about, again, a different story of sort of delivering on this final conflict idea, but they didn't do that.
Well, that's another problem. Okay. So the babies is something I want to discuss, but prior to that, what makes Damien believe that he can overcome prophecy? That somehow Damien... Hang on, I've got...
Are they beagles?
Yes, well, that would be awesome. Well, we lost Jason.
It'd be so sad. Oh, there's Bethany, my border terrier. In keeping with the beagles, my border terrier is barking at the backyard.
Well, I think as long as you're not a priest with a dagger, you're probably pretty good.
Right. But no, what makes Damien think, if everything is going according to prophecy, all right, and, he's born according to prophecy, everything is going great, what makes him think that he can derail fate itself? That somehow...
Why does the devil, a mere angel, think he can overcome God?
Right, why does he...
Right.
So you're right.
So that's the whole point. It's hubris and everything else. You just say hubris would be like, look, I got a plan, we're going to derail it, here's what we're going to do.
Yep.
It's just hubris, and it makes sense. I mean, that would carry weight. You'd be like, okay, I'm on board for that. That's good motivation. He's not a slave to prophecy. He could make this work. He just needs, some good people, and some priests that are terrible with daggers, I guess. But he just needs, he needs some good people, and he can overcome it. Hubris, I think, is it. I think it makes sense.
Yeah, you're right, and that way there's a certain, like Judas himself knows that he's acting according to prophecy, so that makes sense. That has biblical stuff. I could have swapped out any one of the other dialogues for some dialogue on the nature of prophecy. I also can somebody explain to me, what is Damien's theory of evil? Because I don't understand it, and I don't mean I don't understand it because I'm a nice person and I don't agree with evil. I mean, I literally don't understand what the heck is the gospel of Damien. He goes, we need to give ourselves over to these people. The earth needs to be, ruled by evil.
Well, he talks about, and that's one of the better scenes, is he talks about the purity of evil being as pure as innocent, And the way I interpreted that is that he was born unto evil. He was evil even as a child. That's all he's ever known, and therefore he does not see it necessarily as a negative state.
Right.
He is, there's the old, it's a cliche saying almost at this point, but no villain actually sees themselves as the villain, and he seems to think of himself as a liberator.
Well, I could get that, and Joya points out that his idea of evil is pleasure. That, in other words, he's a hedonist, which I can dig, but the problem is that it's as though his vocabulary is limited. Because I find it's hard for me to imagine that you would call that evil. It seems to me you would call it almost anything else, like you would call it.
Well, but to call something good is to adopt the language of his enemy.
No, that's true. That's true. But I mean, I would think that if his philosophy is take what you can, enjoy your pleasure, take pleasure from others if you have the power to do so, be the best you can be. If you will join me, then you can be the best that you can be and take whatever pleasure is yours. I mean, we have a word for that. We call that objectivism. Ayn Rand invented it and wrote about it. So I mean.
But Jason, this is the difference is that's. Like what you're talking about is definitely like we talked about last time. That's more of the like Church of Satan kind of Satanism.
Yes.
Whereas this is a theist. Like if there is, I mean, in the end, it ends up being very much that. If there is an evil, there has to be a good, and vice versa. So to him, the opposite of good is evil, even though evil is like the thing he wants, or that he thinks everybody should be subjected to. So his evil is a word. Yes, they probably could have used a better word for it. I mean, that's true. But what he means is, I'm the opposite of the thing that I hate.
Yeah.
Well, this is his nature, but this is his nature.
Exactly.
And I think when he uses the word evil, it's never, in his mind. Yes, we say the word evil, and obviously we are talking about the literal son of the devil.
Right.
In his mind, he was born into this state. So
yeah,
I think you have to take that into account. I mean, he's constantly talking. Beauty is pain, life is pain, death is pain, beauty is pain, and that's the philosophy of Damien Thorne right there.
Yes. And that brings us really to the love scene with the love interest, which is the third plot, because you got three. You got find me this baby. You got, by the way, there are these priests out to assassinate me. And you got, I just met this nice reporter and I'm going to start dating her. And
that can happen.
There is an interesting love scene where he gives another sort of monologue about how pain is exciting or love is pain or whatever it is, and that's exciting because it's all sadistic and in a sort of a BDSM kind of way.
Well, also remember he recruits her son.
Yes.
So this is not just like, oh hey, I'm going to date this woman. It's like, hey, there's a person who's interested in me. She's high profile. What can I do to corrupt her?
Right.
Her son. Maybe I'll let her die. She's my plaything for a while, but what can I do that's ruinous? Because that's actually that's more of the true evil.
Yeah.
It's not like twirling your beard and, burning things and whatever. The true evil is being ruinous. And knowing premeditated ruin to destroy people through their own, he's going to destroy her through her son.
Yes, corrupted. Very well said. Go ahead, Drew.
Now, when he's manipulative, I think that's terrific. I mean, he's manipulative in the beginning with the president. He has moments where he manipulates. That's really one of his best acts. But one of the things about his evil rants, I think it's okay when he has his monologues, when he's sort of talking to himself, or he's praying or doing whatever he's doing. It seems that one of the things about evil is, I mean, you try and evil's fairly attractive. I mean, the end result of these sorts of things are, as you say, can be ruinous, and that's one of the things that is so evil about evil. But I mean, he doesn't really make any real bones. He's not really manipulating a whole. He's not making the what he's calling evil at all seductive to the human animal. He's not. There's something about this notion of seduction and just being against everything that God stands for, which is really the expectation of sin and the expectation of leading people astray. It's not the fact that it's horrific and you get smacked around a lot. It's the seduction, and this is one of the things that I think is sort of sadly missing from this part of it. Is that, and it's something which I think Sam Neill probably could have done, and I think would have been really, really good.
The scene where he where they're out. We should get actually to this scene with the horses. In fact, with the fox hunt, because several cool things happen there. And one of the coolest and darkest, really, that is his final sort of seduction of the son, the blooding, as it were. If you catch your first fox, they smear blood on your cheeks, and that's all pretty barbaric and also a part of society. And we have this wild scene where, after the assassination attempt, which we'll get to right after this, we have this wild scene where Damien comes back and meets the boy, and he has blood on the cloth, and the blood is the blood of these priests that he's killed. But the boy takes it and brushes his cheeks and then kisses it in like the most weirdly crazy, almost erotic. It was a sicko scene, really, where unless I'm just going too far and interpreting it that way, but I got a weird level of ickiness from that experience.
No, I think you're interpreting it how it was meant to be interpreted.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's good, and it's supposed to be because he's the freaking devil. Like all of that is what you're supposed to feel if you don't think being the devil is cool, or being associated with the devil is cool. You're supposed to be like, man, that's not good. I don't like this.
Yes. Right. This is making me uncomfortable.
Most people should feel that way. I fully agree.
So that's great.
So
let's get to the assassination, because this is the central point of these priests who have been training up like Rocky to take down the devil.
Can I go?
Please.
I love getting stuff together movies, Dirty Dozen type of movies. And it starts out and you're like, they're training up. They're collecting daggers. This is going to be a showdown. How are they all going to come there? Because, again, Drew has talked several times about the rules, right? Well, the rules in the first one where you stab him with one and then you stab all of the knives into him in a cross-shape formation.
They spent a long time explaining that, by the way.
And it has to be in a church. That's the other thing.
Of course. And so here's the deal. They say all of that. And you've got guys who are like, so one guy you're like, oh man, there's like a mystery element, like he's tracking them down, like they're being careful. There's almost like a, like kind of a CIA, FBI, secret spy shit going on, like stuff going on. And, you're like, oh man, they're tracking him. They're planning. These guys are meticulous. This is going to be great. And then they just all turn stupid. There's a guy. They kill a guy. They just throw the daggers down and then run into a hole. It's just like
By the way, what killed them? Are those guys dead, or are they still just hanging out in that hole? Like that was never really clear.
I think the idea is that they die or they drown. They could drown probably because it would flood.
It didn't rain exactly. It's more like they'll be there. They're expected to die. They'll want a sandwich later. Be hungry. And then
if he's truly the devil, one of them will eat the other one. I think that'll be the culmination of that.
If it is just
truly evil.
If it is just flash flooded, I would have bought that a whole lot better. I'd be like, they're going to
I really wanted a flash flood. Yeah, I was like, why can't the devil, if he can chase them around a room with lightning and chase them into a hole? And there's something actually wonderfully biblical and simple about them running into a hole to hide. How come the devil can't bring some rain and drown them? I mean, that seems logical.
Because he wants them to eat the other one. Or something. I don't know what's going to happen.
Although I will tell you, right, the first death in a television studio, when I was working in a television studio, I this image came to my mind where it was like, okay, note to self, do not work in a television studio that has, 2K lights and solvent near a rickety catwalk and some chains. Because you're going to be coated in plastic from a transparency disaster and then on fire. It's a very memorable death. It's probably one of the better ones. But I mean,
that
going
is
very far around to make that work.
That death, like I know that it kind of goes back to the whole like what we talked about too, or like Final Destination. But let me tell you, that was so much better than any of the ones in 2. Like if you're gonna do something like that, that was impressive.
Yeah,
again,
that was
scarring for anyone around. He didn't just fall and he didn't just die. He burnt up. He fell through a bunch of stuff and he just swung there for a while before anybody. You're like.
Well, the thing
that's
that's
terrible
terrible about it,
about
too, is he's dripping.
Right.
He's dripping.
He's coated in drop cloth plastic, so you can't put him out because it's like burning and dripping at the same. That was an astonishing. That was really, really an amazing, horrific, horrible, and impressive scene.
I was the set too.
Yeah.
Like, oh, we got to replace that.
And I love that Damien just sort of puts his hands in his pockets and almost whistles. In my
Ooh, this is much better than I expected.
While you work.
But they get away from the whole thing about the needing all the daggers. Like people are just dropping them, they're throwing them. You pictured them like picking their fingernails with them, just random like.
Well, why do they
has
have
any
decided to
reverence
do this
other
all
than
by themselves, like one or two guys at a time? To me, it would make more sense since you're taking on the son of Satan.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you gang up on him, put a bag over his head, drive him to a church? And for that matter, why don't they hire like a goon squad or something?
Why don't they hire like those? Why don't they make up a bunch of Vatican assassins who like use harpoon guns and stuff? I mean, I don't understand. If you can have a world where Damien.
Okay.
Yeah.
Why is good so inept in this series?
Yeah.
Like it didn't bother me in the first one, but that was kind of the point. It was so heart-wrenching to see Gregory Peck fail. When you get to this one, it's just like, man, are we as a species this inept?
Right.
Well, especially when these guys are training up. Like the one guy gets chucked off the bridge. It's almost like a woo woo, and he just goes off. I expected when you see the lightning chasing him, you expect it to like shock one of them in like a Disney cartoon, and they go whoa when there's smoke coming from their pants. It's just like it's not. It
is. It may as well be Dick Van Dyke there. Well, okay, so let's talk about their best chance is when they do a really clever ruse during the fox hunt where they lure him away.
Except it's not in a church.
Right. It's not in a church, but they've tossed all those rules entirely. But they managed to. They got one. They've got him trapped in the middle of a bridge. One priest on one side, one on the other, but they're still the same doughy, completely inept priests who. I mean, look, he's younger than they are. Even if he's not Satan, it's not going to be easy for these two dorky priests to like walk up to him and stab him. He's got a whole bunch of beagles, and they've and they're just two guys. One is so Damien basically takes care of one immediately by putting his alley on the priest's horse. And so and I don't even remember what happens to that priest. I know the horse. Does the horse pitch him, or what happened?
He falls. Yeah, the horse rears up and he falls off to his. Up the side of the bridge to his death.
Oh, that's right. And it's that amazing fall. That's right. It's like 100-foot fall. So that was cool, except for that, okay, so now we're down to one priest. And that priest is like, well, I'm still going to walk up and stab you. And that's when Damien sicks his beagles on.
See, that's the genius. If he had a bunch of pit bulls, they'd be like, oh, man, we won't take him. They're like, what can he do with beagles? And then Damien goes, aha! No one expects beagles. Take him.
If one of these guys would just carry a gun, it might not shoot him, but you could slow him down.
Well, once again, a harpoon gun and like three priests, and they shoot him and they drag him over the side of the bridge, and or hang him from something and drive dagger. There's a million cool things you could do, and they had plenty of imagination. And it's not like they'd never. Darren points out that the kind of stuff I'm describing doesn't show up until like John Carpenter's vampires, but there was stuff like that, and Peter Cushing would have come up with something interesting to do to kill Damien.
Peter Cushing could have taken care of Damien Thorne in short order, okay?
I agree.
He would have never gotten to be 32 years old if he was taking on Peter Cushing.
That's true.
Yeah, you're right. In the Hammer universe, Damien would never have made it this far. And if he had, yes, one Peter Cushing, and it would be done. We'd bring, well, for Pete's sake, we'd bring the 7 brothers and 1 sister in from China. And
I want to watch.
I want to see
movie
that
twice.
movie.
I want one with competent. All I want is the devil versus competent people.
Right.
even if he can do things, like there's reasons you can be fully confident or you can be overconfident, and evil can win because he's got vast powers that you can't go up against. But
it would have been more heart-wrenching if they had this very well thought out plan.
Yes.
And then it didn't work.
Yeah.
Right, and then you could have your Deus Ex Machina because go ahead, it's Jesus, it's okay. That's fine. That fits within the Christian tradition that everything is against you, but God is on your side. I mean, that's okay. In fact, wow, I know we're going late on this episode, but we need to get to probably the most disturbing thing about this movie, and it gets us to. So we do find out that Damien has an army, but their purpose is not to stop the assassins. Their purpose is to go kill all the young that might be Jesus. And we get a sequence where the disciples of the Watch, right? They go. We have this. Yeah, it's a baby killing montage where they kill a bunch of babies, and I was shocked by the way that this movie went there. I mean, that was.
I just thought it was because when they introduced his disciples, like I was like, that's pretty cool. Like the devil finally has like a bunch of followers. Like they show his minions. It's like cool. Yeah. It's a cool scene. The kind of like he's, because if this, if Revelations happens the way it's outlined, like these are going to be the people who are going to be doing all the business, and that's pretty interesting. That's kind of a cool take on it. Then he's like, and by the way, I'm going to become Herod. So remember that Jesus stuff? Here's Jesus part 2. I'm Herod. And you're like, wait, why is he, what? He's what?
And it's amazing that the movie does that. And if you've been thinking up until this moment, this is kind of a slightly, basically just a regular old horror movie. Now this is pretty dark, when suddenly they're like killing babies all over the country.
It didn't bother me that they killed children because I know it's a movie. I know no kids were actually hurt.
Right.
What bothered me is that they went there and it doesn't ultimately matter a bit.
Right. It doesn't matter. Yeah. No, it's true. And it also, unfortunately, it kind of plays, it has a humorous element because they're one after the other like that, and because they're, even down to the Boy Scouts, it plays a little bit funny. Now, I mean, to some extent, things can play funny and horrific at the same time, but it's just kind of silly. I mean, the Boy Scouts come over, we're going to do
it's not the tone of the series. It's not like we're watching, Evil Dead 2 or something.
Right.
Like, this hasn't been like that.
Yeah. Well, I think it would have been, they could have done it more interestingly if it may have been a few people that he'd narrowed down, and at the point where he actually has to tell his confidant that, hey man, looks like your kid is one of them.
Yes.
See, now that is interesting. That creates conflict. I mean, it kind of happens, but before that, we have all the other stuff. So
so that's interesting.
More, like intimately, like myself, like I've seen enough horror movies that I guess maybe that should bother me more. I was actually really curious when that started. I'm glad that Julia brought it up because I'm like, I need to know like the female perspective on this because it is terrifying, right?
Yeah.
Like,
well,
I mean,
and Henry's wife.
Don't get me wrong; it's messed up. I guess it didn't.
Sure. I mean, I think Julia found it to be a lot more terrifying than I did. I mean, and Julia points out that that because she's in the chat room, she points out that Damien goes to Henry and says, "Hey, you got to kill your kid too," and then says, it's like Abraham and Isaac, and Abraham was willing to sacrifice Isaac, and you should be able to do that for me because I'm, once again, the actual Antichrist, the son of Satan. So this is your thing, and this is where Henry gets off the Damien train. But what I kind of like about this, honestly, is that Henry deserves to some extent what he gets. He doesn't. Now, his child doesn't deserve to die, but in a biblical sense, Henry. If this is a big biblical justice movie, Henry deserves to not skate, given that he's been a part of Damien's inner circle all this time.
But remember, when he brings it up, you kind of think maybe it won't happen. You're pretty sure it will be. But he's like, no, we're cool. That wasn't my wife, right? Like, he kind of tries to weasel out of it. And even he thinks a little bit at first, like, Damien's bringing this up, but he's cool.
We're bros.
Yeah. And then that's definitely, not like that. And that's the point when he realizes, like, absolutely that, it doesn't matter if you're dealing with the devil, he's just going to be the devil.
The devil has to get his due.
Yeah.
And
you're like,
yeah.
Oh man, because that's the other thing. What I like about when people talk about the theistic devil, right? And they go, I get this power and blah, blah, blah. And if you truly believe that there's an opposite of the Bible and that there's this thing, and I often want to go, well, this person is called the Prince of Lies. This person does evil, and evil is the opposite of good. Why do you think, in the same way that, villains do this all the time, why do you think you're going to be different? Like, he's going to be like, oh, man, I've been thinking, this whole evil thing isn't really for me. We aren't going to be bros. Let's hang out more. Let's do,
right.
let's do, I don't know. No,
you can be my son's godfather.
It's evil every time. And if you believe that it's going to be evil, you're always going to get evil. There is no other outcome. And it's always just, it's just funny to me, just crazy that people are like, no, well,
I'll skate.
Okay. Yeah,
somehow at the last minute I'll avoid hell.
He's the Prince of Lies. So what does that really mean?
Right. Right.
Exactly that.
Although Damien doesn't do any lying, I find that interesting. I think you're absolutely right. But Damien is a remarkably truthful person here. He's straight with Henry. He goes, Julia points out that his quote is, if Abraham did it for his God, well, you should do it for me. So, Damien's straight. His seduction is always one of getting you to want to come along with him, as opposed to him tricking you. But his wife doesn't. You get the impression his wife isn't aware that her husband works for her.
In fact, she's probably one of the wives who's like, yeah, your boss is all right. And she's charmed enough by him, but, you don't get the impression that all the times that he's spent hanging out with Damien that she's like, well, because she does kind of make allowances, right? Like, oh, you're home late, all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
You don't get the impression that she's like, oh, man, that is totally worth it. You should spend more time and not more time with your infant son. I
thought her vision of the burnt offering was very interesting. It is a really disturbing effect.
That's creepy.
Yes.
Oh man, it was good. That surprised me. That was out of the blue, and that really was.
Yeah, that was remarkable. So what happens to that baby? Can somebody tell me? Does she kill the baby off screen?
I think with the iron.
He does. Yeah.
They didn't, my impression was that she took the iron to the kid, and then when her husband gets home, she takes the iron in the hand, because she's now hypnotized by Damien.
That seems to be the case. And by the way, one presumes that she's still alive after that. So anyway, all that happens, and so Damien's good to go, except for that he knows that kid is out there somewhere, beyond my reach. And so he goes to the big church. I can't remember why, but he goes to the big church where they're going to have where the priest is going to.
Well, the reporter shows up and says, "Okay, I can lead you."
I can lead you to the priest. Yes, and so that attack goes just as poorly as all the other ones, and so Damien then is left. And the child, who has been his little buddy and little spy and all this stuff, takes the dagger for him and gets stabbed by the priest, and then Damien chokes the priest and sort of tosses him aside, And then Damien walks around in the church calling out Jesus, going, Nazarene, show yourself. And by the way, this is the point where I really thought, here's where I had something to compare it to, okay? At the end of Legend of Hell House, which is one of my favorite movies, Roddy McDowall walks around at the end of that movie shouting at a disembodied force that he wants to call out, saying, I know you're here, you coward. And Roddy McDowall is shouting at a ceiling. There's nothing there, but you totally believe him yelling.
Oh, by the way, that makes a lot of sense. To listeners out there, I've been to one of Jason's parties where Jason decides to call out something. The man who has seen a million horror movies decides that while all his guests are there, not while he's alone and it would only affect his family, call out and go, come get me, ghost, demon, whatever the hell's out there in Halloween land. And we're all sitting there, especially me, like I'm the person who knows a lot of the rules of horror movies, and I'm like, dude, why would you ever do that? and again, why would you ever potentially subject your guests to whatever you summon out of the Halloween night? Thanks, Jason.
Well,
but
thank you for remembering that.
When you talk about that you love Legend of Hell House. And I also say, no offense to Julia or your children, but Julia, if Jason decides to do this again, I'm sorry, but I hope he keeps it to his family. Because Jason, I love you like a brother, but I didn't call the demons. But yeah, you're going to subject us all to that. Thanks a lot. Legend of Hell House, Jason. But it makes sense now that you say, like, hey, that's one of my favorite movies. I'm going to try that.
Right.
Don't be that guy. Don't subject your guests to it.
Okay. All right. I promise I will not call out any demonic forces.
There you go. Julius just talking to himself. We're in agreement.
but no, so I believe it when I did it. I believe it when Roddy McDowall was running around doing it. I don't believe Sam Neill walking around calling these lines. They sound flat. They sound like he's not sure why he's saying this thing. It's the only part of the movie where I was like, Sam Neill seems to have totally checked out. Like I don't get what I'm doing here. And maybe that's just my read on it. Maybe there are big defenders of Sam Neill going, no, Jason, I was totally in that, but not for me.
That didn't work.
My problem with it is that he's going to be under the assumption, because this is all his behavior prior is based off of this, that Jesus is a child, a baby at this point. So he's calling
so
out.
Now comes this is the big twist.
Which again makes no sense. But all right.
Right. What's that? So Adam.
Did it?
Yeah, it's a big It's a joke almost that it turns out. Let's see. Two things happen at once. So mom finally gets up the gumption because her child got killed, which is yet another dead innocent. All right, so she stabs Damien with the magic knife, and so Damien falls over. But as that is happening, Jesus comes back. I'm not kidding. If you haven't seen this, the sky opens up. Jesus comes out of the sky at a distance. We don't see his face. And Damien says,
he's a fully grown man.
And he's a fully grown man, and we get a quotation. First, Damien says a line.
He's an angel. He's like a spirit.
He's an angel. He's a superior being. He's Gandalf the White. He's like a transformed personage, and that's wonderful. Damien says, "Sour grapes, you've won nothing, jerk," and then he dies. And then they give us a line, yet another line from a made-up biblical quote that says, it turns out Jesus was not going to be a baby after all. He's going to be big. He's going to be King of Kings and not a child as before. That's made up. That is completely. It is a rule of this movie that is not given to you until the last 3 seconds of the movie, which is just crazy. That's like so cheating that I don't even know where to. Although it's not unlike Superman suddenly being able to turn the earth backwards. I guess it's just something that is completely. If all they would have to do is put it at the beginning of the movie and go and somehow hint like 3-4 times in the movie that Jesus is going to come back as something other than
well,
like if the priest had only said his failing will be that we know something he doesn't know, anything like that. But no.
You'd think he would tell the kung fu priest.
Yeah.
Well, the priests don't apparently know either because they're all like, we have to protect the baby. We have to protect the baby.
That's what I'm saying. Like, at least, you got this, like, tiny group. Again, this goes back to you can't keep a secret in large groups. But you got this group who, I mean, they've been, like, finding daggers and they've been, like, supposedly training up. But we find out that really consists of just them running at things, I guess.
Yeah.
Like, that's their training. Can you run forward with the dagger held out in front of you? How about that?
Well, absolutely, actually.
And they're like, I can do that. That sounds really easy. But anyway, like, you would expect that Jesus to be like, all right, guys, this is going to be really dangerous. And, look, have a heart. Even if things go really bad, I've got an ace up my sleeve. And I can't really tell you what it is.
Yeah.
I don't want the devil to extract it from you. But just trust me. Like, I got this thing going on. And instead, you just get it in the last 2 seconds. Hey, by the way, I'm coming back. Here I am. I'm a special effect. Great, right? Look,
okay, now, as for that special effect, who is, at the end, Julia interpreted this one way, and I interpreted it another way. I think at the end, it looks to me like Mom is kneeling. Mom is in a cloak now. Mom is kneeling by Damien's body, and she gets up and brushes her hands and walks towards the priest who is alive and not dead, and he's holding the body of the child.
I was pretty sure.
I think that's a nun. I don't know who that woman is. I don't think that's her. Yeah, she's dressed like a nun.
And the mom is holding
No.
Okay.
The mom had the scarf thing around her earlier, and I'm pretty sure that was the priest. That's the impression.
I thought the cloaked figure was supposed to be Jesus.
Right, and that's what Julia thought, was that the cloaked figure was Jesus. Jesus comes down and prays in monk clothes. But I don't
think that's what happened. I like the idea, I suppose. I mean, looking at it, I guess that's the mom kneeling by the side of Damien because Christ has appeared, and then the priest, I guess, because you don't see him choked to death, shows up and is carrying the boy, and he was horrified.
I'm almost positive.
So I guess that makes sense.
I'm pretty sure, because, she had the kind of, like, white scarf wrapped around her earlier. Like, I mean, that's, like, she has that when she... I mean,
so the movie doesn't do us any favors.
When they shoot it finally, right?
By putting that scene at a distance of 50 yards, the movie doesn't do us any favors at all.
Oh, the end is stupid. Like, the way they shoot in and the way they cut away, and again, it's the second time they're like, and here's some text.
Right.
Ta-da.
Yeah, there's more text.
That's so lazy and crummy.
It reminds me in The Simpsons of when they introduced the awesome new dog character, and then
totally Poochie. That's
the
origins of Poochie.
And then at the end they go, it turns out that Poochie is in outer space and he has to go back now. And it was just
just like that. You're totally right. I didn't even think about that. I usually catch that. Yes. And the devil's dead. Ta-da! Look, everybody's good.
I expect for a movie called The Final Conflict, there is not a whole lot of conflict there. Like, we've spent 3 movies watching Damien win, kill people, do all this crazy stuff. Is it too much to ask for that we get some kind of epic battle between good and evil, or even just kind of...
I know that you're supposed to really, like say you're a reviewer, a lot of times you're supposed to review the movie that you're watching as opposed to the movie you wanted. I've seen people make that mistake a lot. But, geez, man, like, you got the Kung Fu priest. Why, what would have been nice? They all congregate. They're going to kill him in a church, like they said the first time. They're going to stab him. They're going to make the sign of the cross with all the daggers. They don't just throw them down holes and, use them to make soup or whatever the heck they're doing with these reverend, daggers that have reverence and weight. And instead, like, he's like, oh, yeah, well, look, I've got all of the disciples of the Watch. Why don't you fight them? And they zombie-like attack all the priests. And they could rip them apart or throw them off cliffs or do whatever. So there's conflict, some conflict. And then you would be like, wow, well, these guys really tried their best. They didn't slip on banana peels or run off into a hole and get trapped somehow by a grate. And then, you're like, why not that? Instead, like, you get Poochie, and he's like, hey, by the way, I'm Jesus, and I came down. That's pretty cool, right? Look at this awesome special effect. And we're going to cut away before you ever see anything else, and we're going to show you some text, and here's the credits. Ta-da!
Yes. Yes.
I want, and this has nothing to do with anything to do with the Bible. In all honesty, it's just this is cinema. This is film. I want the Battle of Helm's Deep. That's
sure.
what I want when something's called the final conflict.
Well,
right. And you can do. Go ahead, Adam.
To be fair, I mean, they probably didn't have the budget for the Battle of Helm's Deep. However, what you would expect would be at least an escalation of the conflict.
Yes.
And that's the thing.
Well, again,
not just the external conflict, that would have been terrific, but even more internal conflict. I mean, more pressure, more of the things that really made the first one work so well. Which, by the way, used to be also when people would find out who Damien was, they'd be killed mysteriously, and that was actually kind of a good part of that formula.
Right.
That seemed to sort of work really well, mysteriously, horribly. That was, like a testament to don't dig around in things you shouldn't dig around in. But there's no real escalation of any of those things or any of those real traits. What you have really is just an older Damien. And that's kind of it.
Well, also you every time you think like, well, maybe he's going to be conflicted about, he actually like loves this woman. Well, not really. He's still just the devil. Like,
so that plot almost doesn't go anywhere.
I think that's what a lot of this is every time you think something, all right, Kung Fu Priest, cool, oh, that sucked. Hey, look, maybe he's rethinking this whole, like, I'm the devil thing. Not really. And it's this cycle of, like, just almost like, wait, we're getting somewhere cool, hold out. Oh,
or even it would have been fine, and I hate to review a picture that is not what we have in front of us. Wouldn't be fine if he said, look, I know how this ends, or whatever, and my dad says whatever. But I'm the son of the devil, so I'm going to do this. This is my plan. Okay, so now we know we're going to check out of the things in the first 5 or 10 minutes of what we expect, and now we're dealing with somebody who's going to rewrite things, who really is embracing everything that he is supposed to be. He has all the attractiveness, all the charm, all the hubris, and the belief that he can not only outsmart God, but also maybe even the devil. He has the embodiment. Here's where the devil went wrong to begin with, and now I'm going to do this. You go, I want to see what he's going to do. That, to me, is interesting.
See, that actually would be really cool if he just had that conflict and that could be the final conflict, right?
Yeah.
Like,
that's
the final conflict is, look, my dad, my dad, he's tried so many times. I know. I'm the son. I'm going to do this.
The apple thing, not so much.
Or like, he could even bring up, like, well, it didn't work out for Jesus when he came, supposedly, right? Like, he still got crucified. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to follow this script, and I'm going to do it myself.
Right.
And then it would set up a lot of things, and that would actually be really interesting.
That's right.
Again, we're rewriting the movie we want to watch, but I think that'd be kind of cool.
Last week, Jason brought up the idea of like taking these movies and adapting it into a TV series, and this setup with this movie really could go there because they didn't even have him as powerful as he could be. Yes, he has this corporation, but politically speaking, he's only an ambassador. But he hints that he's going to start running to be a senator in a few years. Like, that stuff is interesting. I wish they would have almost had like Damien running for office or something like that.
Absolutely. Well, what I was suggesting was that Damien could look, it's 1981, so it's not like this will be that exotic for people. Damien, all he has to do is get himself made Speaker of the House, and then have the president resign, and then have the vice president die, and then he becomes president. Ta-da! And that actually is fairly recent memory to the audience in 1981.
I feel like the only the reason why they made him ambassador is because, you know, it hit some chords from the first movie, but they don't even talk about the Gregory Peck character, you know, except maybe I think 1 or 2 lines in this movie. So like even that, it just goes nowhere.
So
there's
an
a
agreement, by the way.
Yeah.
Dear HBO or Showtime, let us write the TV series where the son of Satan starts at the bottom of a corporation and eventually ends up as president.
Boy, isn't it great?
Trying to be stopped by good. Please let us write that. Send us money.
The mantle of the president, and then he's going to trigger Armageddon and change the outcome, and then no one knows really who he is except for this one guy, and then until he finally will ascend or whatever, and then they're going to get really good priest assassins to go after him to sort of prevent this, sort of a la Day of the Jackal.
Right,
you know,
right.
He has
there
the
you
full
go.
protective powers of the president's office and everything else, and it's just like, you know, it becomes a much bigger deal. But they get really good guys to go after.
Yeah. Yes, it'd be the Vatican versus the Secret Service, because the Secret Service would be protecting the president. And you said Day of the Jackal, and you're right. You could do that movie in 1981 just fine. It's not like they couldn't rappel out of helicopters in 1981, you know. And
And
actually, we should.
There would have been an appetite for that back in '81, considering kind of where we were, you know, politically, and you know, the idea that something like this, you know, there would have probably been an appetite for it. I think for this kind of thing, where I mean, and it's hinted at again. The premise, just on the front of the DVD or on the poster, he's standing in front of the seal of the president. You expect it. This is the kind of thing you would, you know. There he is. There's the president's seal, and then there's the 666 in the corner, and you go, "Oh, this is the picture I've come to see."
It's depressing actually, and it feels like cheating that is the poster. And I know it's not the fault of them that that's the poster, but that is what you hope for. We should get our final thoughts because this has certainly been a long conversation, and I guess it's good.
It's a long conversation for a movie that when I thought everybody just extremely hated it, but actually,
isn't that funny? Everybody doesn't like it, and it gives us a lot to talk about.
Please, networks, whatever, listen to this, whoever, and send us the money. We'll write you an awesome show.
Yeah. Dear AMC.
Yeah, exactly.
We will write your satanic presidents.
We can do this.
The Omen, the TV series.
We can do this. Seriously.
I think I'm breaking that pilot right now as we speak.
Oh no, we lost Jason. That's not cool. Hopefully he's the moderator, so hopefully he comes back in. But
man, still he does.
He should ascend from the heavens like Jesus.
Well, hopefully his dogs didn't get him. That's the intrigue and kind of scary part, actually.
Should we
go on with final thoughts and just sort of vamp?
Endorsements.
Yeah, I guess so.
Final thoughts and endorsements.
Okay, well let's I guess we can start. Adam, how about that?
With my final thoughts.
Final thoughts, and
if you have an endorsement like something you read or a movie you saw,
or I sure do,
or whatever that you think is really cool, you can throw in that plug.
Got it. Okay. So, look, this is just one of those pictures that, you know, I think had a really good setup and had a lot of promise. And it's not that it's a bad movie. I just think that, I just don't think it delivers. And I think it's the disappointment of just the fact that it had a lot of, you know, it was going in a good direction. I think certainly with the first one, and particularly during the time in movies where we had all this atmosphere and everything else, and just this great sort of presence, just the fact that it actually could have been probably a remarkably atmospheric and a kind of a very heavy, kind of exciting picture with all the things that were set up in the first one just escalating to a crescendo. I think it never really materializes. That's kind of a big shame. I could say that I'm glad that, you know, Sam Neill later on did Jurassic Park and Red October and everything else, so he's known for more things, and obviously a bunch of other things. But you know, this picture is still memorable. I mean, I remember seeing it in '81, and it's kind of stayed with me ever since. So, in some ways, not because it was not a good film. It just stayed with me. So in terms of staying power, there are a lot of films that I've seen that I've just completely forgotten about. So for whatever reason, this just stayed with me. So that's a positive thing. So I enjoyed seeing it another time, but it didn't really result.
So that makes you sort of glad that the Omen series is with you, even though it doesn't quite measure up. And by the way, I'm back.
Yay!
You are back.
Unless you're a fox, Jason. Julia, be careful when you get home. It could be a doppelganger.
It's calling out the demons, unfortunately.
Yeah. So beware.
Knock that off.
We're warning you. We know the rules, and I'm not afraid to use them. So
people are later going to go, yes, it was at 11:56 Eastern that Jason went offline, and a few minutes later he was back.
All this talk of rules, we may have to do the Scream series sometime down the line.
I agree.
Interesting.
Oh, that's true.
All right. So thank you for getting into your final thoughts. Yeah, let's see. Drew, final thoughts, Omen 3?
It's an entertaining movie, but I could not recommend seeing this unless you're my heartfelt recommendation would just be to watch the first one and ignore the rest of the franchise. If you are going to watch the sequels, this is the best sequel. I don't even know if I think it's as good as the remake, but it's an entertaining horror flick. It's an entertaining horror flick. I mean, it's not the worst movie I've ever seen, and certainly Sam Neill, he rocks in this movie. So it's an entertaining, but without recommendation. There we go.
All right. Very good.
If I
Tony?
have
oh, I'm sorry. No, good.
well, I was gonna do my.
Oh, I want to come back around for recommendations.
Okay,
gotcha. Yeah. Tony, final thoughts.
I liked it more than everybody else. It does have a lot of really clunky bits, and the ending, just the Poochie ending, is just awful. Like it's so. Everything I didn't like about the ending of 2, where it's like, and by the way, this happens, they just did that, only worse, with a more expensive special effect, actually. You know, I wish that money had been spent on something else. I don't know quite what. More beagles? That would have at least been more entertaining. And this would have looked crazier. With some weapons for the priests that aren't daggers they run forward. Yes. Any of that would have been good. I also, I'd forgotten, this is the first horror movie I remember seeing Siskel and Ebert review. And they, I'm pretty sure, didn't like it. And I think maybe for some of the things that we said, I was so young, and I was on PBS, and we used to watch a lot of PBS. I think this Siskel and Ebert came on after Doctor Who when I was living.
Wow, you just gave me my endorsement, by the way. That's gonna
I think that was kind of. I remember them not really liking it, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" This thing, because I'd heard of the Omen and stuff, but by that time, we were already to the Omen 3, and I was like, "Wow, this is supposed to be scary, but they're not saying good things about it," and I just kind of didn't get it at the time because I was, like I said, I was really young, but that just brought back. I was like, "Oh yeah." I remember them, and they showed the bridge scene, and I think they showed the Disciples of the Watch scene, if I remember correctly. And that Disciples of the Watch scene, actually, because it looks so crazy, like a concert or whatever, I remember specifically. But, that's the scene that stuck with me, but not because I ever watched it, but because I saw Siskel and Ebert.
Wow.
Crazy.
All right. So my final thoughts on this, and also on the series. So you try to compare it with other, because you can watch the original Omen, and it's a great movie. We all loved that. But if you're looking for franchises and comparing this to like other 1, 2s, and 3s of other franchises, and yes, as Darren points out, there is an Omen 4. I haven't seen it, so we don't know. I can't comment on that yet. Might be interesting to check out, but it came like 10 years later. So to some extent, you could judge this as being a canonical trilogy to watch. I compare this with Halloween 1, 2, and 3, with 3 being unrelated. I don't know. I am glad I watched this series. I really am, because I've been wanting to see it for a long time, and I'm not disappointed that I spent time watching it. I don't want my time back or anything. Having said that, there are so many things that I really think that they could have done with movie 3 that would not have spent too much more money, that would have been completely within their capability, and I think they just sort of missed the opportunities. I think, and we called out all of them along the way. So for all those reasons, do I recommend it? Only if you've watched Omen 2 and you're down for all 3. It might be kind of fun, honestly, to watch all of them, because it's given us a lot to talk about. But I thought I was disappointed. So that's a mild recommend on the trilogy, but not a recommend on this movie by itself in any sense. Okay, so endorsements. This is where we call out interesting thing to go out and read, or look up on the internet, or whatever you're thinking about. This is the thing that Julia enjoys least about the show, because she's always like, why must we endorse something? So don't feel you must endorse something, but if you would like to endorse something, you can. Adam, do you have anything to endorse for us?
Yeah, actually, a couple of things. I'm actually watching a lot of Newsroom, Sorkin's Newsroom. It's one of those shows that just sort of stays with me, and I've been watching it. It's sort of in addition to my appetite for horror and sci-fi, all the genre stuff kind of across the board, I watch whatever I can. And I've sort of been watching this, and I'm really liking it. So like that. And a bunch of guys I know up in Canada, UFG, released a title called Sleeping Dogs fairly recently, and it's pretty kick-ass.
Sleeping Dogs.
Yeah.
All right. Very good. Okay. Mr. Drew, any endorsements for us?
Yeah. I, of course, this being almost my third TV endorsement in a row, I think I'm giving the impression that I am a massive couch potato, which is not true. But I have recently got into Boardwalk Empire, which may be my new favorite show, finally unseating Dexter after years and years and years of being a loyal viewer of that. Boardwalk Empire, for those who are not in the know, is a gangster period piece set in the 1920s, and it is produced, and some of the episodes are in fact directed by Martin Scorsese. And if you like gangster stuff, I think this would be right up your alley. It's basically both of the seasons. You get, what is essentially a 12-hour-long gangster movie by Martin Scorsese. And the performances are all really great. The costuming is really great. The dialogue is really great. I mean, this is truly cinematic television at its finest. And Steve Buscemi is slightly cast against type, because after years of playing a sort of a weasel, he's actually very suave and confident in this, and it's actually excellent to see that. So Boardwalk Empire, if you can get it on DVD or Netflix or whatever, please spend your time watching it.
Very, very cool.
I've been, for somehow that slipped through. I mean, I knew about it, but, all of that sounds exactly like something I want to see immediately.
Yeah, it's a good show.
Tony, do you have one for us?
Yeah, well, like we said, finally, after a few weeks, SciComm is coming out tomorrow. I just got copies today, actually, because I'm going to the Here There Be Monsters Con, and I'll post that on the Facebook page so that people can go if you're in Austin and you're listening to this. Lots of cool, it's going to be like RPGs, board games, comics. It should be awesome. And we appreciate everybody sticking with us for SciComm. It's been kind of a crazy journey. So that's really cool. And also, I'm sure you'll be hearing about it soon, but my other thing is I joined a band that covers Japanese rock tunes called Pokari Shred, and we should be playing out a lot in September. So there's that too. In addition,
so you can post about that on the Facebook page.
Yeah, in addition to Deserts of Mars, while waiting to find a drummer, which hopefully has gotten a little bit better recently. I decided to do that, so I'll be playing bass in my first ever cover band. So if you're around Austin again, watch out for that, because we seem to all of a sudden be getting gigs. So
I've been listening to Transmission by Deserts of Mars recently. And by the way, Psycom, in case you're wondering what that's about, Tony and I wrote a manga series called Psycom, and part 3 just comes out this month. And it's about these two teenage warriors on the run from a couple, a guy and a girl on the run from these corporations that have tried to force them to go to war against one another. It's really cool.
By the way, Logan's Run was showing tonight, and I was so like, crap, that would have been perfect, because it comes out tomorrow, and you could have somehow known, like, I don't know how I missed it in the Draft House calendar, but if we could have known that Logan's Run was going to be showing tonight, I would have tried to do something.
Yeah.
Because even though we're much different, like the whole On the Run part is part of Psycom, and
the premise is quite similar. I mean, Logan's Run was was definitely one of the
it's a touchstone, definitely.
Things in our head.
But I was just like, oh, man, why? So anyway, which if you have, I just watched Logan's Run again. Actually, if you have Amazon Prime, it's one of the movies that you can see. So you can watch that while you're reading Psycom, and everything will be awesome.
I've been listening. My endorsement is I've been listening to the Now Playing podcast lately, because they are doing a full-on James Bond retrospective in honor of the 50 years of James Bond. So if you're also a Bondian freak, every week they're doing two movies a week to try to get to Skyfall in November, the new James Bond movie. And so you can listen to the past several, and they're just about to do You Only Live Twice. So it's been really cool listening to them do that, and get those on iTunes. And I should say that's actually it. If you want to hear more of our stuff, or leave us comments and just sort of chat about whatever subjects you want, what movies you want us to touch on, CastleDraculaPodcast.com goes to our Facebook page, which you can just find us on Facebook, Castle Dracula Podcast. And I totally recommend that you leave comments and vote for us on iTunes, rank us, review us, complain about us, send suggestions. We want to hear from you. And we will. Yeah, and it has been so great to hear from regulars. Darren in the chat room here has been with us since the very beginning. So
and actually, Jason, as a final endorsement, I'm actually looking to endorse this podcast. I mean, I'm out in Los Angeles. You guys are, Texas. I'm in Los Angeles, and I'm dealing a lot with writers and working out here and doing various things, and it's really great to, be able to. I mean, I've been listening to this podcast now for a while. It's really great to listen to you guys each week, talk about things. And as I said, I think even on the Facebook page, there are moments in here that's like, it's like film school, but much cooler. And there are a lot of elements here that, and not just genre, but just in terms of cinema and in story and in character, and just also the love of the genre, also in for television, film, comics, games, all things horror and vampire, and we should definitely do more vampires. You guys should definitely do more vampires. But I just want to endorse this, because I think it's very cool what you guys are doing. And thanks for having me on.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you
for being our guest.
That's great, actually. Like, you're one of our, super real deal guys, so that's pretty cool, man. Thank you.
Yeah, and as a pinch hitter, you were outstanding. I mean,
totally.
So all right. Well, that'll be good enough for us this Monday. Coming back next Monday, and we'll be back with something. I have a feeling it'll be vampires, but we haven't announced it yet.
Excellent.
So, yes. So, all right. I will. I'll talk to you guys soon. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you on the Facebook page. Adios.
Take care.
Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.